As we see here between the two players, we have not seen too much of Ali since his Season 2 victory here on the Open Series. We've seen him in Standard sometimes with blue-green ramp, but I can't remember the last time I've seen Ali actually in Legacy.
After he was playing a lot more during Season 2, and that was capped off by that invitational win, defeating Chris Van Meter in the finals. But towards the back half of 2015, we did not see him in a lot of Opens. But since he already had his invitational Players Championship spot sewn up, might as well take a little time off.
Yeah. I have to imagine, unlike last year, I'm happy to see Joe Lossett back on Miracles. I think his gamble last year to Reanimator was really powerful, but it's always a pleasure to watch him play this deck.
This is a labor of love for Lossett.
Now we do see both players start off. Looks like Joe will start on a Ponder. Ali's deck, for those of you not familiar with Imperial Painter, does play a large number of red blasts in the main. He has 2 red elemental blasts and 4 pyroblasts. Those carry a lot of weight in this matchup.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a way to punch through the combo, and if you can get a Painter Servant in play and name blue, then they can become Stone Rains and Vindicates.
Red Elemental Blast takes care of Joe's turn 1 Ponder, and Ali follows up with a turn 2 Blood Moon. Now, you mentioned this is actually not the hard lock it always is here.
Miracles plays with a lot of basic lands. It's important for this deck to make all of its land drops. It doesn't want to get hit by Wastelands early on in the game.
Yeah, see here, so Joe kept just to a single island. It's going to be Phyrexian Revoker from Ali. That one, I assume, is naming Divining Top as soon as it hits the table. Joe's going to spin in response.
Though Lossett's list is a little bit lighter on basic lands than, let's say, Reed Duke. The last time we covered him in Legacy, I think he had upwards of 9 or 10 basic lands in his list.
It's normally 8 or so.
Lossett is on 5 islands, 1 plane. So on the play, this Blood Moon does have the shot at being disruptive.
Now, this might be due to the fact that Joe is not playing Entreat the Angels this weekend, right? So there's no need for a second white source.
Right.
Revoker does name Sensei's Divining Top. Joe will cast a Ponder. That'll be hit by another Red Elemental Blast.
And I like attacking the cantrips aggressively once you have a Blood Moon in play.
Sure, yeah.
Because once Lossett finds a second island, that Blood Moon might not be worth anything. So you got to be pretty aggressive.
We see a swing from Revoker and Goblin Welder from Ali. He's nearly emptied his hand, which is something we expect out of Imperial Painter. I believe his last card is another copy of a Red Blast. For Joe, it looks like he'll just be playing some non-basics right now. Cavern of Souls the play for the turn. Now, Cavern, a somewhat recent addition to Miracles, is naming Human thanks to the 2 copies of Monastery Mentor and 3 Snapcaster Mages in Lossett's deck. And Ali will go to work. Some swings from Welder and Revoker, and he plays Grindstone. That's half of the combo for the deck.
Yeah, he can do a little column A, column B action if he wants to, too. A little beatdowns, a little mill.
Well, that's something that's interesting here. You think about Painter this combo deck a lot of the times, but it really seems like you're just trying to cheese the other player out insofar as, these beats of a 2-1 and a 1-1 may just be enough to win over the next 4 turns.
I like Aintrazi going the other route here, which is grindstoning himself. That's a very nice thing to do when you have a Welder in play. If he is able to find the other piece of the combo, he can weld away the Phyrexian Revoker and do it all in one shot.
Sure, Painter Servant would take care of that. But the beats will continue. Revoker and Welder swing Lossett down to 11. So we go back Joe's way, a full grip. Nothing he can play here just yet. And for Ali, Painter Servant was milled off the second Grindstone activation. I don't know if there's anything stopping him from just going for the combo.
Especially if he finds another land here, he can do it all with Red Elemental Blast backup. I think that's a hard one to get away from.
So he's going to use Grindstone, put the Grindstone trigger on the stack, and then weld the Grindstone away for Painter Servant.
I like this play a lot more because it means that Lossett can't do anything with the Divining Top to try to find some interaction and response.
And that will mill Joe's entire deck. All of his deck is 1 color, so they all match. And game 1 will actually go over to Ali Aintrazi.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty big upset, but that's what I thought Aintrazi's path was in the matchup there, was just try to land a knockout punch early on in the game. That Blood Moon effectively qualified as such. He had a Revoker to shut down a Divining Top, and Lossett could never get anything going once Aintrazi was very aggressive at attacking the cantrips with his various Red Blasts.
Yeah, and from Joe's side, I feel like he actually did a great job of playing around what Ali's strategy was. Turn 1, he fetched for a basic. He attempted to ponder into a second basic, but the I guess, counterpunch out of Ali, a turn 1 Red Blast into a turn 2 Blood Moon. I didn't feel like Joe had many lines to get around that.
I really liked Aintrazi's line there. You know, Blood Moon's a really binary card. It's either doing nothing or locking your opponent out, and he did as much as he could to make sure that it was a lockout.
All right, looking at the sideboard, we'll start over on Joe Lossett's side. That's the Miracles player. You see here he has a Pithing Needle, a Containment Priest, 2 Is It Staticasters, 2 Rest in Peace, a Flusterstorm, a Pyroblast, a Red Blast, 2 Submerge, 2 Wear Tear, and a Venser. What do we like in the matchup?
I love the Pithing Needle and the 2 copies of Wear Tear. Those are great in this kind of matchup. They interact with the combo very well. I think the 1 copy of Venser is also, even though it's a little on the slow side, still represents enough interaction. I'm not a big fan of bringing in the Pyroblast and Red Blast in this matchup because a savvy Painter player can simply send the Painter Servant to green or white or something and not allow you to cast your Red Blast for profit.
Sure, there are no blue cards in his deck. They would only work in once Painter's resolved.
Correct.
All right, on Ali's side, his sideboard, 12 different cards, mostly one-ofs. We'll go through them quickly here. Engineered Explosives, Thorn of Amethyst, Termod's Crypt, Trinisphere, Aethersworn Canonist, Containment Priest, Duergar Headmage, Rest in Peace, Enlightened Tutor, Pyrokinesis, an extra Red Blast, and 2 Pyroclasm.
Not a whole lot of superstars in this matchup. I think the additional copy of Red Blast is easy enough to bring in, and I think the Thorn of Amethyst and Trinisphere, they're not ideal in this matchup, but they're probably disruptive enough to be worth bringing in. Ali's got some dead weight in his deck. He's got several copies of Ensnaring Bridge in the main, which are not good in this matchup, so there's some wiggle room for him to bring in some narrow cards.
Yeah. So players are going to get ready for Game 2 here. We are actually going to talk about on the SCG Tour. We have now Season 1 all scheduled up. So looking to play in the next season, maybe get qualified for next year's Players' Championship. We'll go over where we will be headed. And that's going to start our first Open January 2nd and 3rd in Modern. That's going to be in Cincinnati. We make our way to Charlotte, Atlanta, Columbus, and then we have our regional championships on February 6th. We'll tell you more about those. Those are Modern. And then we end the season with Louisville and Philadelphia. So we round things out with Indianapolis and Baltimore, and finally the Season 1 Invitational weekend in Columbus, April 15th through 17th, Standard and Modern. So going back to the match that we have here between the players then, we're looking at Joe's side. Down a game here, you know, I don't feel like he had too many plays to interact with a fast draw from Ali. I imagine he's just hoping to fade that kind of start?
If Lossett's on the play, he can resolve a cantrip on turn 1 and fetch for a second island on turn 2. It's a very different game if he's on the play. But the nature of the draw there lined up very well for Ali being on the play. He was able to Red Blast the Ponder, get a Blood Moon into play. Lossett was without a second basic land, and that was essentially the whole game. So now, certainly with Lossett knowing the matchup here, he is going to put a big priority on getting basic lands out. Once he can ignore Blood Moon, then Aintrazi's got to beat him straight up. And that's a hard thing to do, especially with Lossett having access to Counterbalance and Sensates of Behind Top.
Yeah, you certainly felt like last game that Joe, the card he needed was Force of Will, but there was just a lot of pressure on him to have one in his opener.
And Aintrazi was equipped with a lot of Red Blast. I'm not even sure that a Force of Will would have been good enough there.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes sense. Some notes here about the players list. On Ali's list, he's heavy on main deck Spellskite this time. I know on Joe's side, he's mentioned switching away from Entreat the Angels. He's lighter on cards like Terminus than you'd normally expect as well.
I think the reason for Spellskite in the deck, there's 2 very common pieces of interaction Spellskite's good against: Abrupt Decay and Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt is disruptive to the combo because you need to keep a 1/3 into play to execute it. It's one of the vulnerabilities of Painter is that decks with bolts even are able to interact with you. Lightning Bolt's usually not interaction against a combo deck. And Abrupt Decay, of course, is all over the place. So Spellskite gives you some protection against both those cards. Source of Plowshares as well represents disruption. Spellskite can absorb one of those.
Sure. Yeah, and then like I said, he's made the switch over to Monastery Mentor as opposed to Entreat the Angels. It's a little more of a creature-heavy build than we're used to seeing out of Joe Lossett with Miracles.
And I'm surprised because, to me, the major incentive to play with Monastery Mentor in this deck, at least game 1, is a concession to the clock. Is trying to win the games fast enough. And here, with sudden death rules, meaning there's no draws, with a little bit of extra time on the clock, Lossett must really want this card to put in the deck because time is not the same issue that it is in Open Series events and Invitationals.
Yeah, clock management has been something that has been a concern for Joe. Talked with him before the tournament. Picked up a fair number of draws this year in 2015, hoping to cut down on that.
you see a lot of metagaming going on at the Players' Championship. There's 15 competitors alongside you. You're often going to have a strong sense of what they're playing. Joe going to a pretty extreme measure this weekend with a main deck copy of Submerge. I have to imagine he was putting the Roanoke crew, or at least Tom and Todd, on Infect, which is a really challenging matchup for Miracles, and Submerge is definitely a good way to tilt that matchup back into your favor. It's definitely an unexpected card to see in the list, and you can't argue with the mana cost in that matchup.
Yeah, and it's actually there's no copies of Infect this weekend, and I think a couple players were caught off guard. One player talking to John Morawski, for example, in Elves, packed a couple copies of Malira Sylvok Outcast in his deck for this weekend.
The hate for Infect can be really strong if you're willing to be fine-tuned about it. Malira, remember last year with Reduke having Peacekeeper in the sideboard of his Miracles list?
Yeah, that was a beating for Tom Ross.
And Lossett with a main deck Submerge. I think that Tom and Todd, first of all, they just followed Brad's lead and thought that Death and Taxes was a well-positioned deck. And second, I think in this kind of tournament, you can expect to see some of the more egregious hate cards for your strategy, especially in Legacy, where the sideboard cards can be extremely potent if you're willing to be narrow about it.
Yeah, I see cards like a Malira, like a Submerge, that can really swing a matchup by themselves. Other note of talking to the competitors, something that we aren't seeing too much of this weekend is graveyard hate. Actually, talking to players about the list, there's no dredge players in the room. There aren't any reanimator players, I don't believe either. And a lot of players think correctly read that, and we're seeing fewer surgical extractions, fewer Leyline of the Voids than we'd normally expect.
Still plenty of copies of Rest in Peace in the Death and Taxes decks. But that card can also come in against Delver decks, whereas Leyline of the Void, Surgical Extraction, those are much more explicit anti-reanimator, anti-dredge kind of options.
Yeah, we did actually, you're right, we did see Rest in Peace do a good amount of work against Jacob Wilson last round.
Not ideal in that matchup, but it still did more than enough work, especially since some of Jacob's most important sideboard cards in that matchup were Dark Blast and Ancient Grudge, especially in game number 3. That Rest in Peace was a huge issue.
Ali down to 6 here. Joe has kept on a 7. Mulliganing's pretty common for the Imperial Painter deck, though.
Well, whoever loses this match, or these games of this matchup, are likely to do it with spells left over in their hand, either because Aintrazi's killed or locked Lossett out of the game really fast, or Lossett has picked apart the few pieces of Ali's hand that matter, and he's left over with a bunch of 3-mana 1/1s and grindstones with nothing to pair with them. So you got to find functioning hands, because someone's dying with spells left over in their hand, most likely.
You mentioned earlier Ali's looking to have his wins come no later than turn 3.
Well, not necessarily a win. I think that game was around turn 4 or 5. But he had stunted enough of Lossett's development that it was trivial to finish off the game. He closed out a lot of Lossett's options, and at that point it was just, can you beat Force of Will?
Right. The Blood Moon was turn 2, and that was the big play.
Yeah.
Ali has kept on 6. Looks like he has the fast mana enough to make a turn 2. I believe a turn 1 Blood Moon is at the ready here.
He can play this alongside Soothing Spirit Guide. He can also wait a turn, try to do a Red Blast backup, but I think he's just going for the most disruption as early as possible.
Well, this is something we certainly don't always see. Turn 1, Ancient Tomb, pitching Spirit Guide. This is a 3-mana play on the first turn. This is really the deck at its strongest.
But you see, it's going to be a lot harder for Aintrazi to win games like this post-board with Lossett on the play. Lossett able to fetch for an island right now. He's got the planes in hand. He has Wear Tear in hand if he even needs to interact with this thing.
Yeah, Joe definitely aware that he needs to be playing about Blood Moon. So in response to the Blood Moon, he's going to go ahead and fetch for a basic island.
You can see Aintrazi's approach in the matchup there. He could have just gone turn 1 land Sensei's Divining Top.
Yes.
And try to pick a fight somewhere down the road. But I think Aintrazi feels like he can't really win this kind of matchup unless he's landing a knockout very early on. He's going for it here, but I think Lossett's going to be able to play through.
Smile on Joe's face. He's got to be happy that he was at least on the play this game and able to get blue. And now from Aintrazi, we'll see Sensei's Divining Top. Remember, casting that off Scalding Tarn thanks to the Blood Moon that's in play.
Yeah, Aintrazi took a very aggressive line this game because you can see his hand now. He's got a Plateau and Enlightened Tutor and a Pyroblast. So he had a route where he could have just played the Divining Top activated it, cast Enlightened Tutor at some point. So he's given up on casting the Enlightened Tutor because he doesn't have access to white mana right now. He's given up a turn of looking around with Sensei's Divining Top, and all this was just an effort to get Blood Moon into play on the first turn.
Well, we'll go even a step further. Outside of the 3 Lotus Petals that were in his main deck, he has no white sources that will work under Blood Moon. He has no basic planes in the deck. And it looks like we will see a Wear Tear cast here, end step on the Blood Moon to unlock the mana for Joe Lossett. Let's go back to his side. I believe he's clear. Looks like he's clearing the way for a Counterbalance. 2 copies of it in his hand. And that is exactly what we're going to see. Counterbalance, Joe leaving up Swords. It's the first piece of the lock that he needs here.
And the lock is very good against Aintrazi because it requires a lot of 1-mana spells, and there's just a lot of 1-mana spells in this deck in a general sense.
Ollie will spin top on the end step. Sees a second top on Red Blast and another land. Not sure he'll want to keep any of those. Well, Joe with the Counterbalance half of Countertop. Doesn't have Sensei's Divining Top yet. So any counter spells he hits would have to be incidental, at least right now.
Mm-hmm. But it is step 1.
And Ollie main phase looks like he'll try to Red Blast the Divining Top. We'll see what the top card is. It is it's not only just a 1-mana spell. It's probably the 1-mana spell that Ollie wanted to see least of anything.
So now I think he's going to have to do this, try to Red Blast the Counterbalance again before the Divining Top resolves, because once that lock is in, that Pyroblast is worth very little.
Right, once a top's in play, then 1-mana spells won't resolve anymore.
Yep.
So here we see Joe back on turn 4. He'll go for Sensei's Divining Top. Ollie's going to try a second Red Blast. This is in response to Divining Top before Ollie can put it back.
And this is almost, I think this game's almost a wrap already if this if this Counterbalance stays in play through this Pyroblast.
Well, remember, Joe has a second Counterbalance in hand, even if this one gets countered. And we will see, can Joe blind hit a 1? And just make it look easy. Red Blast on Counterbalance, Joe will flip. It's a basic island. That one's not going to work, so Counterbalance is down, but Divining Top is resolving. And here's a replacement copy of Counterbalance to go with the Divining Top. You see some resignment there on Ollie's face, having fought so hard over the first one.
Yeah, I mean, now his hand is just, it's Enlightened Tutor, which he cannot resolve, and has nothing to go get with it anyway at this point.
The upside of Enlightened Tutor is that with the Painter Grindstone combo, it can find whatever half he's missing. However, being a 1-mana spell, Enlightened Tutor doesn't seem like it has much mileage anymore.
And it looks like Aintrazi has brought in the Pyroclasms. This is as a response to Monastery Mentor. I don't think that I would pursue this path in the matchup, because I think once you're at the stage where Lossett has a Mentor in play and is doing stuff and you haven't killed him, that the game is a lost cause.
I mean, if you look at this game, Joe will eventually win the game with Monastery Mentor, but that seems, rather inconsequential. The cards actually that are winning are Divining Top and Counterbalance.
Exactly. This game was kind of determined inside the first 2 or 3 turns. Monastery Mentor has very little to do in terms of the games getting decided inside of 2 or 3 turns.
Now, it could just be a situation where Ollie has enough cards that are weak in the matchup and in the sideboard that at least Klasm does something.
Well, there are 2 copies of Ensnaring Bridge, and that's a pretty easy cut. But beyond that, everything else is, it's mana, it's some form of interaction, it's the Red Blast. I don't think he has a ton of dead weight beyond the bridges. And even the Ensnaring Bridges aren't technically dead weight. It's also kind of an answer to Monastery Mentor.
Sure. I mean, as much as Pyroclasm is.
Right.
All Joe really would have to do to stop Pyroclasm is leave up a Brainstorm. Well, Ali using a combination of fetch lands here with his Sensei's Divining Top to try to find a way to dig out of this Counterbalance lock. But so far, he has been unsuccessful. So you see both players are just trading land drops. Looks like Joe has picked up a Venser, Shaper's Savant, which he can end step here.
It wouldn't surprise me if Lossett made some sort of move here, not necessarily right now, but maybe at the end of Ollie's turn, to Venser the Divining Top back, try to lock that out. Then you're cutting off a lot of Aintrazi's selection, and he's trying to play through Divining Top Counterbalance, and you get a clock going. And Aintrazi's at 12 because of the various fetch lands and Ancient Tombs.
Yeah, so you're saying is even though that play is card disadvantage, I mean, Ali will draw in response. That doesn't really matter at this point.
Aintrazi's deck is nothing but card disadvantage. So you can afford to give a 2-1 back to him. Remember, this is a person who went turn 1 Simian Spirit Guide to try to put a Blood Moon into play. So card economy is not really what this game is all about.
Top of the deck for Ali is a Phyrexian Revoker, a Painter Servant, and a Magus of the Moon. But you look at how carefully Joe has fetched lands here. Hit 4 basics in play.
No, the Revoker here is a big draw for Aintrazi. If you can get this onto the table, you can shut down the Sensei's Divine Top, and then maybe you can just play through the counterbalance having to be played au natural.
Certainly would power it down. Here's Phyrexian Revoker from Ali. Takes 2 to cast it off Ancient Tomb. We'll see how Joe wants to respond. It looks like he has Terminus and Swords to Plowshares in hand to deal with creatures.
I wouldn't be surprised if Lossett's path here was spin, and if you find a 2 and can get off the table for free, that's fine.
Great,
and if not, get it off the table with Swords to Plowshares.
See what he wants to do. He has been leaving up end-step Venser mana. So I think for Joe it's a decision as to how, whether, by spinning top here, he's sacrificing the Venser play. But he'll do it anyway. Top is spun. Sees an island, an Izzet Staticaster, and a Monastery Mentor. So 0, 3, and 3. It looks like a Revoker will resolve. Now I'm a little surprised to see Izzet Staticaster in the deck right now.
Well, there's some problematic cards that are one toughness. The Phyrexian Revoker locking down Sensei's Divine Top is not something Lossett is thrilled with. Also, Goblin Welder can do some work to cut off the counter spells if Aintrazi is able to sneak it into play early enough. So, Staticaster is not great, but Lossett also dealing with some dead weight or close to it in his deck.
Draws the land. Sensei's Divine Tops indeed have been locked out by Phyrexian Revoker. So we know the top of Joe's deck is a pair of 3s right now. Not sure whether Mentor's next or is it Staticaster's next. But there's a chance, I mean, Joe's just leaving it there for a blind flip.
Well, there are some 3s in the deck. You could possibly something like Blood Moon or Magus of the Moon.
Sure.
There's a Jaya Ballard hanging out in there.
So 3s are live. For Ali, swings in for 2. He puts Joe to 16. And now here is a Painter's Servant. Painter's Servant into play. Some updates from the bracket over in Group A. Going to have a match at 2-0s next round. Kevin Jones with a 2-0 victory over Jacob Wilson. So Jacob actually drops to 0-2 to start the day. Brad Nelson, a 2-0 win over Rudy Brixa. So Death and Taxes with the Roanoke guys, 4-0 so far.
Yeah, and for Jacob Wilson, one of the most highly regarded players, already back against the wall here in the Legacy portion.
Well, he and Rudy will have a match at 0-2 next round. Painter Servant naming red here. Now that's a little different of a name. Normally we see players name blue to turn on Ali's red blasts.
Well, it's possible that Aintrazi respects the possibility that Lossett has brought in his own red blasts. This is common in the post-board games for this deck.
Sure. So in that situation, does it matter that it's red, or does it simply matter that it's just a non-blue color?
Just matters that it's non-blue.
Joe will Swords at the Revoker. We know the top cards of Joe's decks, either an Izzet Staticaster or a Monastery Mentor. Looks like in response, Ali's going to cast Enlightened Tutor. I'm assuming he's going to try to get the other half of his combo.
Would not surprise me if Lossett used the Venser here, because Aintrazi cannot recast Enlightened Tutor right now, and Lossett is planning on breaking the Revoker that's locking out the Sensei's Divine Top. Once he has Sensei's Divine Top counterbalance, he doesn't care all that much about Enlightened Tutor being in the hand.
So it looks like Enlightened Tutor is going to resolve. And that'll get Grindstone. So that's the other half of the combo for Ali. It's a dangerous spot for Joe Lossett right now.
Well, once the Revoker's off the table, all the one-cost cards are locked. So it's not all that threatening right now.
So Grindstone being a 1-mana card here should be tough to resolve. And actually we see Ali change his mind on it. He's reveals Engineered Explosives, maybe for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, he can try to get the explosive set to 2, get the counterbalance off the table, and then he's sort of playing Magic again.
Now, an interesting trick here that Ali can do with Engineered Explosives, if he wants to play around counterbalance, is if he wants Engineered Explosives on 2, he could actually overpay on mana for the Engineered Explosives, right?
Right, it's a funky thing with the Sunburst cards. X can be whatever you want it to be. You can spend as much mana as you want to.
So maybe if he puts 4 mana in, Joe only has Jason Venser at 4.
Right. And then when the card resolves, it just looks at, well, what different colors of mana were spent on this.
And there'd be 2, red and white.
Exactly. So you can do some of the same shenanigans with Converge cards as well, because Sunburst and Converge are very similar mechanics. It's a weird case with Explosive because it's an X spell.
Right, so...
it's an odd one, but, Aintrazi can work around it if he suspects Lossett's got a lot of 3s on top of his deck, but doesn't necessarily have 4s.
So... Revoker is exiled, and Joe will go spinning with the top. We see Monastery Mentor is at Staticaster, and one further down, it looks like Snapcaster Mage. This is a great offering for Joe.
You can see the way these games are going to play out. When Aintrazi can land something big in the first 2 turns, Lossett can't necessarily respond or play through it going forward. But once we get out of the first couple turns of the game, and let's compare the individual quality of our Magic cards, Lossett's got an enormous edge on Aintrazi.
So an update on this group, Group B. The other match going on currently is Hunter Nance versus John Morawski. Hunter was victorious, so now Morawski and Nance both at 1-1. With a win here, Joe would take sole possession of the lead of the group. And Monastery Mentor was the draw and the cast for Joe. We go back to Ali. You see that Magus the Moon he's been floating. Engineered Explosives, that one he got. And other update from our matches, Death and Taxes, just seeming to be a great call. Todd Anderson, also 2-0 now with the deck. It can't go 9-0 because Todd and Tom Ross are in the same group, but it might be able to 8-1 at this pace.
Yeah, they'll be squaring off next round.
And it looks like Engineered Explosives from Ali. And this is actually the play we were talking about. Looks like he's put 4 mana into the Engineered Explosives. So, and Joe, the last card down, Jace the Mind Sculptor. So, some fancy footwork by Ali, but Joe not fooled.
He did his best, and if he set it for 3, it also would have gotten countered.
Or 2. Joe had all of them.
Right. Aintrazi gave himself the best odds to get the explosives into play, but Lossett's top 3 were ideal for countering Engineered Explosives.
And with that play, I mean, it seems like that was Ali's real last hurrah to get out under this from under this counterbalance divining top.
I think this game was on low odds the whole way through. We might be at 0% now.
You see Joe end step there, drew a card with Divining Top just so that he could recast it. That's a trick here with Monastery Mentor you frequently see from the Miracles players.
Especially good once you get 2 tops into play.
Oh, that's great.
You flip it, reverse it, and...
It's a 2-turn kill, basically. The first turn you make a bunch of monks, and the second turn you prowess them all. And here's a swing. Ali down to 7. A lot of that damage has been done off his own Ancient Tomb, but now Joe's helping. With the help of Jacob Wilson, even. That 1/1 monk token, that was Jacob's selection from winning the Season 1 Invitational. And from Ali, he's going to have one more shot here. This one's going to be Magus of the Moon. It may resolve here, but to what effect? I mean, it's hurting Ali as much as it's hurting Joe.
Yeah, it's Grey Ogre, and Lossett's got the best Grey Ogre of all time in play. So,
I mean, when you look
Not
at
gonna line
Monastery
up.
Mentor and Magus the Moon next to each other, yeah, one of them does seem to outclass the other. For Ali, top cards are land, divining top. Nothing else is going to resolve here. Joe, trying to think. I think he's debating end stepping the Venser and just attempting to win. Looks like we Snapcaster Mage, and that'll work as well. So Joe Lossett evens it up at 1 game apiece here with Ali Aintrazi.
That game right there was a great demonstration of why I'm not a big fan of Pyroclasm in the matchup, because I do not believe Aintrazi can win the games fighting fair at all. The idea that Lossett plays a Monastery Mentor and makes a Monk, and Aintrazi has a Pyroclasm, and they play 3 or 4 more turns, and Aintrazi gets the combo set up, I don't think that's happening.
So even on that board, even if you assume that the Snapcaster Mage and the Monk token and the Monastery Mentor are all gone, I mean, what chance does Ali have of winning from there?
Exactly, and if you're in the type of matchup where you are willing, Aintrazi had an acceptable hand to try to slow play a little bit. You could have just played a top, had an Enlightened Tutor, Red Blast, something for value down the line. He went for turn 1 Blood Moon instead, facing down a basic island. So Aintrazi clearly prioritizes just trying to land some wild shots early on in the game and hope Lossett can't play through it. And if that's your strategy, then I think trying to respond to Lossett's board is not something Aintrazi has the resources or the strategy that can really execute that sort of plan.
Yeah, and I mean, from Ali's side, I have to imagine he was unhappy to see that basic island, but once he's kept a hand of Ancient Tomb, Blood Moon, Simian Spirit Guide, I mean, does he have another line?
Well, he had the slow play line. I don't know which one is preferable. This is not a deck that I have a lot of personal expertise with, but he chose the most aggressive line. He was going to hope that Lossett's hand couldn't function through the Blood Moon, the same thing that happened in the first game. Even though he had a path to slow play and try to set up kind of a more natural game plan. If that's the line you're going to take, then forget Joe's board. Who cares? Well,
I agree.
His deck is trying to do what it's trying to do, and I think now Aintrazi should focus on doing that one thing.
So Ali, it looks like how he's sideboarded is he's brought in the Red Elemental Blast, the Engineer Explosives showed up this game as well. Not certain he has much else to go to. On Joe's side, we did see Is It Staticaster join that game, as well as Wear Tear and Venser Shaper Savant.
No surprises here.
Definitely does seem like it has followed up. So, one thing you mentioned on the Season 1 schedule, we now have our regional championships announced. You're going to want to find those at StarCityGames.com/regionals. That's happening this February. This is going to be our modern regional championships. We have them at 16 locations around the country, so you're going to want to find the one nearest you. This free playmat and exclusive token guaranteed to the first 200 players to attend each of them. This is Season 1 on February 6th. And yeah, if you're looking to play in them, we do have the locations announced, so you can find more about that. StarCityGames.com/regionals. You see the top 8 of the event will qualify for an invitational. We have the Season 1 Invitational in Columbus happening this April, as well as some cash prizes and, of course, SCG points for those of you trying to make it to, say, perhaps a Players' Championship at some point.
A lot of prizes here. Again, go to StarCityGames.com/regionals for more information. The venues have just been announced all around the United States, so go to the website now, find the regional championship closest to you, and if you're not competing in the Pro Tour that weekend, go get your Modern deck, battle in Star City Games Regionals.
Yeah, same weekend actually as the Modern Pro Tour. You see here, these are the locations announced. 16 different spots around the country. You said you actually might be playing in one this time around.
Well, my schedule is a little bit lighter next year. I'm going to have some time, and the one in San Diego is about a 2-hour drive. I enjoy Modern, and I might be heading down. I've said it before, but I think this is the best shot.
This is going to be the year.
I think this might be the one.
Exciting ones. I've played A regionals, did not win it. Made top 8. It was close.
Okay.
Close. Still have to make it to one of these invitationals, you know. All right, we're going to go to Game 3. We're going to go to Game 3 here. So Ali Aintrazi back on the play. If you're Joe Lossett, knowing what's happened to you Game 1 and what almost happened to you Game 2, I mean, how much do you need to see Force of Will in your hand?
If the hand doesn't have a basic and doesn't have Force of Will, you need a really good reason to be keeping.
Yeah, I mean, Joe's deck doesn't have anything like Spell Pierce or Daze. None of that. I suppose of his interaction, most of it comes at 2 mana, if at all.
He is vulnerable inside the first couple turns of the game.
Yeah, we did see game 2. Once he works his way out of those first 2 turns, then it was fairly clear sailing for him.
Now, with Aintrazi taking a mulligan here, you can be a little bit looser with your keeps because it's just a lot less likely that he assembles turn 1 Blood Moon and locks you out of the game. But if Aintrazi keeps 7, your hand needs to check off some very specific boxes to be kept.
So if you're in Joe's spot now, so he actually gets to make his decision after Ali. Ali goes to 6, and now Joe can decide. So you may reevaluate based on seeing Ali go down a card.
Yeah. It's the same thing when you're playing against decks like Charbelcher or Storm.
Sure.
A lot of these decks that put you on Force of Will or Bust, when your opponent keeps 7 on the play, you have to respect that they have a hand that's going to do something very powerful early on in the game. When they mulligan, who knows?
So for Joe, I mean, there's a lot of appealing hands like a turn 1 top, turn 2 counterbalance that are very strong. But maybe if he doesn't have, say he only has that play off Tundras, oh, now we're in dangerous waters.
That's a hand where if Aintrazi keeps 7, you might have to let it go. But with him going to 6 cards, you're a lot more likely to keep it.
All right. Well, it looks like next round we're going to have a full 2-0 matchup between Tom Ross and Todd Anderson on our hands. Tom Ross also victorious with Death and Taxes, defeating Alex Bestecki. So all 3 of them at 2-0 right now in Legacy. Looks like Ali is going down to 5 cards. Other result, Danny Jessup, a 2-1 win over Ross Merriam. Teamer Delver defeating Sneak and Show. Ross really branching out actually this tournament. His normal Legacy standby decks, things like Elves and Storm, he went with Sneak and Show this weekend. We've never actually seen him play the deck. He's off to a difficult start though at 0-2.
It is a surprise. I would assume given Ross's 4-year resume with Elves and very recent success with Storm that he would have gone with one of those 2 decks. But the Players' Championship is a different field. And you can make some very, very tight metagame reads on people and play decks that you don't see people typically play. I mean, the Legacy portion already has been full of that with 3 copies of Death and Taxes and Ross on a totally different deck. But so far, not great.
Talk to Ross after he saw the metagame for Legacy. Felt like maybe his Audible was not the best call. A lot of Death and Taxes in the room.
This feels like a pretty good field for Elves. I mean, there's a little bit of miracles, and that matchup's not great, but 3 of the best players in the room playing Death and Taxes.
Yeah.
If Ross knew that, I think he would have sleeved up Elves for sure.
We'll see. There is one Elves player in the room, Jonathan Morawski, kind of our wild card from Massachusetts. He's on the deck. So we start the game here. Game 3 underway. Ali looks like he's kept a hand of a bunch of fast mana. It is 2 Lotus Petals, a Simian Spirit Guide. Now, the only payoff card in his hand right now is Engineered Explosives. So that
does not count as a payoff card.
He could do it for 3 different colors. But how about this? Draws Blood Moon on the next turn. That's what Ali was hoping for. We see Petal, Blood Moon right here.
And you see the difference. If Aintrazi has a 6-card hand, let's imagine that Blood Moon's the 6th card. This could look very different. Lossett's going to be again an opportunity here to get some basics.
Now, Joe's first fetch land, we really have to point this out, was Arid Mesa, which that's really not free here because he can't get blue before Blood Moon comes down.
Well, he has, it looks like an island in hand, so I think he led with the Mesa so he could get the basic planes.
Okay.
Already has a basic
right.
island, and he can play some magic.
So he will get to cast his spells, at least some of them. Terminus the draw there. No reason to miracle that just yet. You see he'll play Scalding Tarn as a mountain and pass. So now the pressure on Ali is how does he win from here? He's going to start with Grindstone.
And I think Lossett here with a 3rd land and Wear Tear in hand. He's going to
Well,
get
this is a pretty good board for Wear Tear.
He's going to get it all.
Plays an island. I think you're right. It's sitting there in the middle of the hand. Destroying an artifact and an enchantment. 2nd Grindstone from Ali. He'll pass. And this seems too good to be true for Joe Lossett. A fused copy of Rare Terror. And look at the patience on him right now. Just not even casting it at the moment.
There might not be a huge rush if he's not planning on playing something on his 4th turn. And the Blood Moon can also potentially prohibit a little bit of Aintrazi's development too, because he got all these 2-mana lands in his deck.
Well,
Plateaus too.
This was interesting. Had he Wear-Teared, he would have been able to make a Jace the Mind Sculptor this turn. Now, I think the consolation prize is nearly as good. You see Monastery Mentor, the play for Joe. And for Ali, it's going to be Engineered Explosives on 0. That'll take care of the Monk tokens.
That's the least of Aintrazi's concerns.
Well, he had the early lock piece, but he didn't really have a way to win from that spot.
Yep, and the 7-card hands can often have a lock piece plus a path to win the game. On 5 cards, you're probably going to be missing at least one of the two.
Yeah, Ali was missing both.
And it's hard to win against Miracles when you don't have both of the pieces early on in the game.
Monster Mentor will swing for 2. Joe taking it slow, as we know him to do. Cavern of Souls was set to Wizard. Normally the set we see is human. Do we have a wizard, a non-human wizard in the deck?
Going to the tape here. Oh, Vendilion Click. There you go.
And for Ali, a second copy of Blood Moon, which he actually cannot. Oh no, he pitched Simeon Spirit Guide for the 3rd mana.
Yeah.
So he can go for this. This might get a response from Joe.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Wear Tear on the Blood Moon and the explosives, and then maybe something else done here, fetching another basic island with the window that he has with the Scalding Tarn, and then letting the Blood Moon into play.
He's going to do exactly that. So recap, Wear Tear takes care of the Blood Moon on the board and the Engineered Explosives, makes a Monk token. Fetches for a 2nd blue. Now the Blood Moon gets to resolve, but now that Joe has 2 islands, Jace is online, things seem a lot more reasonable.
Oh, I think Lossett can be very aggressive about just Fate Sealing Aintrazi out of the game at this point.
Yeah, Aintrazi, no cards in hand, cannot grindstone himself out of a Fate Seal. And with Monastery Mentor, this may not take Joe long at all. That is an addition to the deck that really has helped speed up its pace. This card does not waste its time.
No.
So it'll be Jace the Mind Sculptor for Joe. That's off the 2nd blue he just found. Making a 2nd Monk token. His creatures will prowess up to 3/3 and 2/2. So it looks like we have a swing for 5 at the ready. And Joe gets to decide what he wants to do with that Jace. And you are right. It is going to be a Fate Seal on Ali. Ancient Tomb. We'll see if it does that. I guess if he leaves it, Ali can start milling himself, but that's still not a lot of action.
And that's also just a ton of damage off of those Ancient Tombs, with Lossett putting on a lot of pressure.
Draw from Ali. The Ancient Tomb we know about plays it. 3 mountains in play for Ali. We pass back to Joe. He has him at 13.
I guess the argument for maybe not giving Aintrazi land number 3 is that 3 mana is a flashpoint for Aintrazi to do something, but with Lossett having another Jace Fate Seal at the ready if he wants it, plus probably just attacking for the kill this turn, you can allow Aintrazi to have that 3rd land.
Yeah, 2 Monk tokens in play.
The only thing that they're trying to do right now is make sure that the monks that can attack this turn are separated from the monks that cannot attack, as they'll be coming into play this turn. That's it.
It's the Bitter Blossom trick, if you will.
Exactly. And I think Lossett's found enough cheap spells where the 2 eligible monks alongside the Monastery Mentor are going to be able to wrap this up pretty easily.
Well, each spell comes with a Lava Spike attached to it right now. See Pithing Needle picked up from Joe.
So he's got 4 in play, so he needs 9 more, so 3 spells.
That's how I read it. No cards in Ali's hand. He'll start with Counterbalance. 3 pumps makes a Monk. He does have Pithing Needle. And if he has Swords to Plowshares in hand, which I believe he does, that would do it.
Yep. That's all the spells he needs. He also has a Brainstorm, too. I mean, he's got a lot of routes here.
Pithing Needle. He'll name... Well, I'm not certain it really matters.
Probably Grindstone, I guess.
There are 2 Grindstones on the board, sure. You see Ali picking up and reading there. He'll go ahead and Grindstone Joe in response. See if he can get the deck. Nope.
Sure.
Nope.
Worth the shot, I guess.
Pithing Needle is in play. 2 prowess triggers have happened already. And yeah, Joe's seeing this one. Here's Swords to Plowshares. just going to double check. Right now he has 10 power of creatures. So if he swords is one of the monks, his creatures will prowess up to 13. You see a wave of the hand there. Ollie's going to do the math, and he sees it as well.
4 plus 3 times 3.
I can get behind that.
Yep, there it is.
That's 13. Conveniently Ollie's life total. We mentioned before, Monastery Monk does not waste time. No different. This game was no different. And we'll confirm here, just to get a final count, that this is lethal. If not this turn, then almost certainly next. But for Joe Lossett, miracles, you know, like I said before, I'm happy to see him back playing his deck. You see just a lot of these detail decisions in the game. Things like end step cracking a Divining Top for an extra monk. These sorts of plays. Joe knows all the ins and outs, and that's going to lead him to his second victory here at the Players' Championship. 2-1 over Ali Aintrazi. Joe takes sole possession of Group B.
And you can see it's a very extreme matchup. Game 1, Aintrazi able to land a big play early on in the game. Lossett not able to fight back. Game 2 with Lossett on the play, had an opportunity to fetch the basics and make Aintrazi beat him straight up, which is really hard to do. And then in game number 3, Aintrazi's deck mulligan to 5, which is not uncommon for a deck that has so many odd disconnected pieces to it, and was not able to assemble something meaningful in time.
All right. So win.